him out like he was,
You know what's the real fight? What's the real money fight?
Diaz trying to finish with a submission. He's got it! Couldn't do it! He's trying to get out of it. Connor's in serious trouble.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
Nate Diaz is widely recognized as UFC's biggest gangster, not solely because of his fighting style, but rather his authentic and unfiltered personality, which in today's world of fake characters enabled him to stand above the rest and beat the system by playing the game in his own way, like a real gangster. From breaking out of the violent streets of Stockton, California, to beating the UFC's biggest superstar and holding the promotion over the barrel, lighting up the joint on live air and giving a middle finger to everything that's mainstream, Nate has transcended the sport itself to become a cultural phenomenon and a generational icon. He was born in Stockton, California, a town known for its socio-economic struggles, high crime rates, and dangerous neighborhoods where young people like him and his older brother Nick do not receive many opportunities to pursue a better life, but rather rely on the streets to show them all its colors, which typically includes exposure to crimes, gang violence, bullying, devastated social norms, and poverty. In response to growing up in these settings, the brothers would develop a rebellious nature and mental toughness, according to which backing down is not an option. Each obstacle is just another scrap. Nate's early years in particular were marked by a lack of direction and discipline, but growing up in a tough Stockton environment played a key role in shaping his personality and developing a reputation for being resilient and street smart, personal skills that many would praise later when he reached the top of the UFC. But despite their troubled upbringing, the Diaz brothers found a sense of purpose in martial arts in 2000, with the older brother Nick being the first one to join Cesar Gracie's jiu-jitsu. Then after Nick got kicked out of high school because of a street fight, he would take the responsibility as an older brother to influence Nate to get off the streets and start training with them. And it worked, as the combination of the Cesar Gracie influence, discipline, work ethic, and structured environment helped transform Nate's life. Instead of wasting time on the streets, Nate starts spending all of his free time working hard on the mats and competing in BJJ tournaments, which also motivated him to live a more disciplined life outside of the gym. It didn't take long before the brothers set their eyes on MMA because, apart from teaching BJJ, their main coach, Cesar Gracie, was also training MMA fighters. And to no surprise, the brothers were more than interested in testing their skills in freestyle combat. Officially, Diaz kicked off his career in WEC promotion in 2004. Unofficially, however, he began fighting at 17 years of age in bare-knuckle unsanctioned matches, also known as Vale Tudo, where he would fight people much older and physically bigger than he was at the time. After securing a couple of dominant wins in WEC, Nate got the spot on the Ultimate Fighter Season 5 show. Despite being an underdog, Nate would unleash his Gracie Jiu-Jitsu to win the whole show with 3 submission wins in the tournament phase, and TKO stoppage in the finals against Manny Gamburian. Along with the contract, the extra media exposure enables him to showcase his potential and unfiltered bad boy personality and start building a large fan base. Although he wasn't as outspoken or eloquent as some other fighters, people loved Nate for being who he is and standing up for himself during the intense arguments with other members on the show. 2008 was arguably his best year as he managed to win 4 fights in a row, out of which 3 were submission finishes and 3 post-fight bonuses, including the one for his spectacular finish of Kurt Pellegrino. Despite losing the next 2 fights in 2009, Diaz was still young and seen as one of the best grapplers on the roster, celebrated for his incredible toughness and durability inside the cage, and of course, a deep gas tank which enabled him to always push the high pace and drag his opponents into the deep water and break them. After his career went back and forth for a couple of years, Diaz regrouped himself and started taking his career more seriously. His title campaign started with an armbar finish over Takanori Gomi at UFC 129 in 2011, before putting on what many consider his best ever performance against Donald Cerrone at UFC 141 by landing an astonishing 82% of his shots to showcase his improved boxing skills. And then a few months later, submit Jim Miller in the UFC on Fox 3 main event to make it 3 in a row. During this time, the UFC was also hitting the mainstream rise, which opened the doors to fighters with charisma and marketable personalities to get a lot of media space to brand their presence in the sport and increase their worth. with many fighters playing fake characters and putting on WWE-type personas, saying the same things and pushing the same narratives. Nate's natural charisma, down-to-earth attitude, and unfiltered personality got recognized by the fans because each time he was on the mic or inside the cage, fans knew they were about to see or hear something authentic. In 2012, the brother duo was at an all-time high, with Nick coming to the UFC as a Strikeforce champion to beat legendary BJ Penn and secure a shot at the interim welterweight belt against Carlos Condit in February, and Nate fighting for the lightweight strap the same year against Benson Henderson at UFC on Fox 5 in December. The match itself went in a typical Diaz fashion, with Nate taunting the champ, constantly talking to him, showboating, and of course, landing multiple disrespectful Stockton slaps, which was entertaining, but not too productive as Henderson managed to cruise to the final bell. And this fight perfectly summarized Diaz as a fighter. On one side, people always criticize him for not being more methodical, technical, and strategic, and this certainly cost him more wins. But on the other hand, this kill or be killed type of gangster mentality is relying a bit too much on his iron chin is what makes him and his brother so special and exciting to watch. Though this was a major setback, with Nate also losing a controversial decision against Condit, the best was yet to come for Nate. In the following 2 years, Nate would suffer 2 defeats against Dos Anjos and Thompson and get an impressive finish over Gray Maynard before accepting a fight against the always dangerous Michael Johnson that completely changed his life. Leading up to a UFC on Fox 17, the Diaz brothers would face huge injustice after USADA issued a 5-year ban to his brother Nick for failing a marijuana test, which ultimately ended his career. Nate would once again showcase his toughness by stepping into the octagon just a few months later and putting on what many consider his best octagon performance against Johnson, and let it all out in the post-fight speech. And oh boy, how quickly it would all turn upside down after his legendary call-out. McGregor was initially facing Rafael Dos Anjos in his ambitious attempt to recapture the lightweight title. However, the Brazilian pulled out just 2 weeks before the fight, and the UFC officials knew exactly who to call. Although much different, McGregor and Diaz were a perfect bond, and despite a 10-day short notice, the two managed to hype the event with just a few media appearances. When the cage doors closed on fight night, Nate would shock the world by weathering the early storm by relying on his incredible toughness and durability to eat bomb after bomb from the Irishman before dragging him into the deep waters and submitting in the second, and of course, drop a legendary line. Finally, after 11 years of competing at the highest levels, Nate already proved his toughness and talent inside the octagon, so now was the time for the last missing piece: money. Wisely, he first decided to cash out a 7-figure paycheck for a slugfest in a rematch before going on a 2-year layoff, and then coming back to capitalize on his star power once again by fighting for the symbolic but marketable BMF belt against Masvidal, which was the UFC's way of recognizing Nate as one of the toughest to ever do it. But as with everything else, Nate saved the best gangsta moment for last. After being away from the sport for 18 months, Nate returned to the octagon to face a title contender, Leon Edwards, who at the time was on a 9-fight unbeaten streak, with no one really expecting Nate to do well. As predicted, the bout ended up being a one-sided beatdown by Edwards, with Diaz not offering much in return, up until the very end. With a bit over a minute left on the clock, Nate managed to blast Edwards with a signature Stockton slap, only to hide a cross down the middle which landed right on the chin, forcing the Brit to stumble backwards. With Diaz chasing him down, slapping him, and taunting him in the process as he always does, Edwards managed to survive to the final bell, proving once again that the Diaz brothers do not lose fights, they just run out of rounds. When you look at Nate's life and career, it's impossible not to be struck by the sheer toughness that defines him. His toughness is not just about his ability to endure punishment inside the cage, although that is undoubtedly impressive. It's a product of his upbringing, a testament to the streets that shaped him and the rebellious nature that refuses to back down from any challenge. His impact on MMA goes beyond wins and losses, as he has transcended the octagon, becoming a symbol of defiance, a representative of the streets that raised him.